Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Fulton. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at AgeSmart Community Resources, and I would like to thank you for joining us for the last but definitely not least of our speaker series for this year. Today we have Brad Lavite from the Madison County Veterans Assistance Commission here to talk to us about benefits, how to apply, what the Veterans Assistance Commission does. Before we go into that, I would like to thank Home Instead, who is the sponsor for today's event. Cindy, would you like to come up and say?
Sure, thank you. So, as Chris said, Cindy from Home Instead. We do non-medical help for seniors in their home. We do have a contract with the VA, so we can also provide care for veterans. They can, and might be something more that you'll go into detail, but if they need a homemaker, somebody to help them in their home, the goal is to be able to keep them in their home and help them with any kind of personal care, medication reminders, that kind of stuff, so we can help them get bathed and dressed, fix meals, that kind of stuff. If they are in the VA system, they just work with their doctor and their case manager. We get the referral, and the VA pays us directly, so the veteran doesn't have to pay any of it. So that's why we wanted to sponsor this today. So we think that's just a really awesome thing, and not enough people know to even, ask about that service. So thank you guys for coming. And I just left some information, like a flyer in there, if you want to put any of your papers in that brochure, but inside there is the paper for it has like our MPI number. If anybody's interested, they can go to their doctor and kind of explain. You can even take that flyer and that'll explain what we can do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, and thanks again for sponsoring today's speaker series. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad and let him tell you all the wonderful information he has.
Am I live?
No.
Oh. Okay, I was going to have to clean it up a little bit. Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Lavite. I'm the superintendent of the Madison County, Illinois Veterans Assistance Commission in Edwardsville. I've been superintendent since 2009, and then I retired from the military out of the reserves in 2017 with 23 years of service, and then a tour and a half, or almost 2 tours back to back in Iraq, in OIF 1 and OIF 2, which is Operation Iraqi Freedom 1, which was in 2003, and then Operation Iraqi Freedom 2, which was just second year in 2004. Been doing this a long time, so I'll go kind of whichever way you guys want to go with the conversation. I'm pretty knowledgeable about the different areas of the VA, but I'll kind of start high, and then if we can settle on something, we may stay in that space and talk, about that more than, just general benefits overall. If you have specific questions in any of the areas that I might talk about, just pause and we can talk about it more. If you feel like you need, hey, I know someone who needs this, or wants more information, I have stuff I'll pass out to you guys here about how to get a hold of us in Madison County. And then we also have a VAC here in St. Clair County, if you're in St. Clair County, and I'll kind of explain the dichotomy of the way that they kind of work. Before we begin, how long do I have, just so I know?
Until you have an hour and a half.
An hour and a half. All right, so I'm done. I'll be done in about 5 minutes. That's fine. Oh, I can. But I'll be done in about 5 minutes. We can divide it kind of. Then I'll spend considerable amount of time in some areas, maybe more than others. But I wanted to test this. It looks like my screen's not going into sleep mode, which is good. So I'm primarily going to refer to some stuff here, but I'm going to get some of the stuff out to you guys. If you just take one, pass it around. I'm just going to get these things going. So I'll talk about kind of. I'm just going to keep giving them to you. So there's 5 handouts coming around, I think 5, and a magnet and a business card. You just sign that. And then there's a sign-in roster coming around too, just so we can calculate the number of attendees for our outreach. We won't contact you unless you're in need of services. So when we're talking about the VA, there's a big difference and a wide kind of sea in between the different levels of veterans and veterans benefits and where they come from and who provides them, and then the eligibility, who determines eligibility, who's eligible. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So in our office, we're the Veterans Assistance Commission. So what that means is we're the lowest level, which is the county, for veterans, families, veterans, their families, their loved ones, people to come in and for us to assist them. And what assistance means is defined by the superintendent or defined by the state law. So down at the lowest level of the county, we can help veterans apply for benefits that may be administered by the state or may be administered by the federal government. Now, if you look at the federal government and you hear the word VA, right, you hear that a lot. We're the Veterans Assistance Commission. We help people get to the VA at the federal level. And we have what's called Veteran Service Officers. So in our office, we have 5 Veteran Service Officers that are accredited or trained, and they pass a test, and they attend annual CEU training in order to do the work on behalf of the federal government, on behalf of the veterans and their families. Does that make sense? And without that accreditation, and I'll just pause here, if you're working with any entity or any other entity outside of VSOs or accredited veteran service officers, then you need to always ask that question up front. Are you an accredited veteran service officer in order to do this work? When I get into the kind of more into what we do, what that work is, you'll kind of see how the importance of accreditation comes into play. So when I say the VA, the federal government, that is the federal government, and that is the big bear. That is the federal VA, Federal Department of Veterans Affairs. It is I think, the largest medical system in the world. So it's a big bear there, the Health Administration. Then you have the Benefits Administration. That is the VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration. The Health Administration is the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration. And then you have the last part, which you're probably familiar with too, is the national cemeteries. Jefferson Barracks, or any of the national cemeteries that the federal government may manage. And then the last one is what we call headquarters or central office. That's where all the managers are, the supervisors. That's the Department of Veterans Affairs in kind of Washington, D.C., right? That's where all the politics and stuff comes out. We primarily deal, our office, as accredited veteran service officers, primarily works in the VBA, or the Veterans Benefits space. We're not doctors, we're not a clinic, we're not providing any treatment to any veterans. We're strictly there to help them identify and navigate the benefit landscape. within the veterans benefit space. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. And how is it managed is now, for those of you guys who are, I'm like on the digital divide, which probably many of you are too, everything is pretty much being managed by websites and apps and phone apps and everything, and so is the VA. So if you're maybe 50 and below, right, you may still be accustomed to, hey, I want to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, or 50 and above, I'm sorry. 50 and below, you're probably caught in this middle where, you wish you could talk to somebody, but you can kind of navigate around and do things within an app or on a website. Then you have people like my daughter, they're like, what's a phone and why am I talking to people? So, and there's a lot of frustration that those technology causes for people. So the VA also works underneath the same kind of hierarchy with technology. They're moving very fast. They're already there. So one of the handouts is VA important information. I think it says that is the federal government's app. And that app manages all of the veterans' care or the family member's care if the family member is receiving services through the VA from the veteran service. So they got to go to that app. And within that app, there's three parts. There's the benefits part, or there's the service part, the veteran part, when they were in service, all their personal information. Then there's a tab in there for healthcare, so they can click on the healthcare part. And I can kind of show you the website here in a minute. They can click on the healthcare part, and then that's all of their healthcare stuff. So if they can receive their care, like in our case, the primary hospitals here in St. Louis are John Cochran, Jefferson Barracks, and then we have clinics. We have primarily one here. We have one here in Belleville. Is it still Belleville or is it Swansea? Is it Swansea? So in Swansea, and then you have a whole bunch of them on the Missouri side, like smaller walk-in clinics, inpatient clinics, outpatient clinics, outpatient clinics. So on that tab within that app, I can click on it. I can see all of my appointments. I can access all of the doctors that are providing treatment in my care. I can instant message those doctors, and I get a response back within 24 to 72 hours, depending on what I'm asking. I have access to a 24-hour, 24/7, 365 nurse line, where I can call a nurse. From that nurse line, they can do triage. They can provide medication if needed. They can call it into a local pharmacy if you can't get down to the medical center, and then they can set up follow-up appointments to see your primary care when you're better. You can also see all of your treatment records that they have uploaded online. So I go down. Yesterday I had a doctor's appointment. I go down, I meet with the urologist down at John Cochran, and then I leave that appointment, I check out. From that app, I can also claim my mileage to and from that appointment, and then the next day after I met with the doctor, she had all of her doctor's notes, her, findings, and then I can go to another section of the app or log into the website, and I can see all the tests. I can see all my results. I can see all my numbers. Now, you're getting a little too deep there for me, but it is helpful for some people who need to track all that stuff. And it's available right then for the veteran to download or use or give to another doctor or help them manage their health care. And then there's another tab in the app called Benefits. And then that kind of lays out all of the benefits that the veteran may be able to apply for or maybe receiving. So they can go in and I can see my service, I can see that I'm receiving compensation, and I'll get into this in a little bit, or pension, what we call any monetary income that you may be receiving as a result of your military service. You can see all of that stuff. You can see all of the claim history and the benefits part. I'm going to get into what a claim is in a little bit. And a claim in that portion, same thing. I can see all the claims that I've ever filed. I can see the doctor's notes from that side of the house. I can see the reasoning, what's called a notice of decision letter. I can see why they made a decision, and then what I need to do next if the decision was not in my favor, or if I needed to provide additional information to the VA. So that is there. Now, a lot of veterans, it used to be, and if you want to write this down, for those of you guys who are on the fence or maybe helping people navigate this stuff to set up this app, it is critical because the VA is going to keep cycling that veteran, whether they're 85 or 20 years old and all in between, to this app to manage their care. And you know as well as I do, if you work in this industry, that is probably where everything breaks down, is in this navigation component, right? Because when you're asking somebody who's sick with cancer, having a mental health breakdown, can't find housing, hey, log into this app and do X, Y, or Z, and somebody will get back with you. It's very cold, right? So that's primarily why, another reason why we exist is we're there, and we can talk to the veteran and their families in person. But we're also limited to what we can do. So if we have, as accredited veteran service officers, we get what's called a PIV card, which is basically a card we put in a machine, and then it allows us to access the claim management screen at the federal government. But we do not have anything but read-only access. So I only can read stuff on the screen. They won't let me print stuff for you or the veteran. They won't let me print stuff for me. I can't fax stuff from there. Everything is housed within that environment. And it's kind of the back end of this, so it's not as pretty as the front end or the app that you would see. It's very dry. Like there's not a lot of flashy things going on. And that is called the Veterans Benefits Management System. So the VA app is pulling from that Veterans Benefit Management System, and that's kind of some of the stuff they're showing. Same thing on their healthcare. The healthcare side has their own system that all the doctors and everything log into. That's where our divide happens. We do not have access to any of the veterans' clinical notes, any of the findings, or any of that stuff until the veteran releases that stuff to us, and then we can look at it, or they can bring it in hard copy or however they have it. So, in a nutshell, that's the VA, the federal. 3 parts: Veterans Health Administration, Veterans Benefits Administration, and then the National Cemetery. Now, there's a lot of talk about adding, or there used to be another one, a 4th one, and there's a lot of talk right now about adding it back in and separating it out from the Benefits Administration, which would be education and training. That's a big one, and it is also already separated out. So if somebody has a GI Bill benefit, right, and they have a GI Bill benefit question, they can't come in our office and ask us about their GI Bill benefits because I do not have access to that system, nor am I able to help them apply for that GI Bill benefit. In that case, they would have to go to the entity where they're trying to get that benefit. So in our case, any public institution, SIUE primarily in Edwardsville, they have a military and veterans service center there on campus. They would be the ones who would be able to help that potential student get enrolled in school, set up all their GI Bill, and set up all their education and training benefits. We can do limited stuff, just not GI Bill, right? So there's all these silos. And I know Chris and I've been around, I don't want to say a long time, we've been around a while.
20 years plus.
A few years. And we've been at different meetings through the years. And there's all these silos. So if you work in this industry or you work in whatever industry you are and it's helping people and you understand that, you know, you may understand, I may understand what Chris does a little bit, but I don't understand everything and I don't understand all of the laws that govern how she has to do her business to be in compliance with whatever. So we're held to the standard of that accreditation. So we have an accreditation number. And why is this important? Because when you ask for that accreditation number, it's basically saying that the federal government has deemed that entity and then deemed that person as a reputable person, and they're not going to charge you, they're not going to do anything against the ethic, they're not going to do an ethical violation. Now there's these entities out there that are operating right now that are called claims poachers. You may have heard of them. They advertise, hey, come in and we will get all your benefits because you're missing all these benefits and you and your family are entitled to all these benefits. That's just bait, right? They're just fishing. And then the loved one calls because they're sick with cancer, they need health care, they need help paying their rent or whatever, and then they get them to come in, and it's primarily, I don't want to show the love, is there any attorneys in the room? Okay. It's primarily attorneys, or an attorney who comes up with these motive of operating outside of the guidelines, right? And then the veteran may come in and apply for a benefit, and then it's kind of a bait and switch thing. So they get them in, and then they're like, oh, well, come to find out you're not eligible for this benefit. However, if we move some of your money around in your finances, and we take some money over here, we put it in a trust over here, you'll be eligible for this benefit. And then guess what the lawyer made in between? They didn't make money off of helping the veteran file for benefits, so they got away with that portion of circumventing the law. They can't charge to help a veteran apply for their basic benefits. But they made money on the estate, wills, power of attorneys, moving money, financial planning, all of that stuff that's associated with that. And then by that time, once all that stuff is kind of set in motion, and the person signs the documents and all that money has been transferred and everything, come to find out that the federal government still wants to see the finances and know where everything is. So, and then by that time the family may come run into somebody like our office or somebody, and then we have to explain to them, number one, why they're not eligible. Number two, we have to undo maybe a lot of the stuff that they should have never done to begin with, without starting at the lowest level possible. Now, I'm not saying there are not attorneys out there that are doing great work. There are, because some of the attorneys are training us when we go to our annual training. So there are veterans out there, or organizations out there, and entities such as attorneys and stuff that are doing good work. They are also mentioned on that accreditation site. So they can do the work. This is the divide. The divide of the work, if it's an initial filing for a benefit. So if you come in with your loved one or you're the veteran, you come in and you're like, hey, I want to file for a knee injury that happened in service. And they come into an entity like ours, we do not charge for anything at all, for any work, no matter what it is. And then it goes all the way up to the VA. The VA decides their case and denies them their knee injury, right, for their disability. Then the family and the veteran has a choice. They can either stay with us and then we can represent them if it goes to what's called the Board of Veterans Appeals. And the Board of Veterans Appeals is its own federal court that deals nothing with appeals of veterans cases across the United States. And I myself am not an attorney, however, by virtue of that accreditation and doing business in the veteran space, the VA has allowed us to go in and argue or present that case and argue the case before a federal judge. But it's not like what you would imagine as a court where, you know, the judge is on a bench and the veteran comes in and they got their bad knee, and it's more of the judge comes in, or you're sitting in front of a camera like this, and I'm at a table with the veteran, or one of our service officers is at a table with the veteran, and the judge is on the other side of the table, very informally asking questions in order to arrive at a decision. And most of the judges, and we get trained by them judges too, even if you don't know kind of where you're going with an argument or kind of what you need to say, the judge will help them, because it's always in the best interest to get the veterans benefits faster and not having to get to that level, because by the time you get to that level, it's been a while. So our goal is, whenever a veteran or their families come in, is to win that case at the lowest level possible. So that's what we do. We're accredited by the VA, so I'm going to spend some time here, but I just want to pause. And is there any questions about the difference between the three departments of the VA and how they operate? All right. So now there's a lot of confusion. Veteran will call our office, or family member will call our office. We help them file some paperwork to the VA, and now they assume that we are the VA. And they assume that we are the ones making the decision. We are the ones that are helping the veteran file the paperwork and advocating on their behalf and helping them navigate that process. Our ability to help that veteran ends once it crosses over into what we consider, one, coaching, right? I can't coach the veteran. I can't go, even though I know what to say and how to say it, because that judge and different people has trained us. I can't say, go into the VA and say X, Y, and Z, and they're going to give you your benefits, right? So there's that, and we can't, there's not a special number that I can call to get anybody their benefits. We all have the same number. So if it's not on any of these sheets, the number to the VA for the benefits administration that we have to call to is 1-800-827-1000. And that's to the national call center. Now, people can call and ask them questions about stuff that I'm talking about now, but you never know what you're going to get, because they're funneled, your call's funneled to a queue, and then it gets answered by the next available representative. And if it's something that they can't answer, they're going to look up your zip code, and they're going to say, go see Brad at the Veterans Assistance Commission, because he's accredited, he can help you do this work. And then therein lies the frustration, because then they come in, and the veteran's like, I called the number, and now I'm back down here, and now you're telling me I got to go to an app. So our office tries to stop all of that and figure out exactly where the veteran is and the family is and what they need right then. Because a lot of veterans, we used to call them bar stool advocates, because the veteran would go down to the VFW American Legion and then say, they would sit next to another veteran on the bar stool, and the one on the bar stool would say, you need to go to the VA and get all your benefits, right? And then now that person's the advocate, and then they're coming in and they're like, my brother Jim and my neighbor Bob, and so it gets very confusing. So we spend a considerable amount of time undoing those misconceptions. Yes?
I got a situation similar to what you're talking about, but why is it sometimes if we go through you and then you guys go present this information to the VA on something you might think should be expedited, and yet they take forever to make that decision?
Yeah. So they do have expedited, what's called an expedited claim, right? So expedited claim means you're terminally ill, homeless with no income or no ability to provide for yourself. Over, don't quote me, I think it's 80, like over 80 years old, you go into a queue for expedited. So there's these very specific categories. And if it's not in that category, the VA is going to run your claim just like in the normal queue. So there's no, once again, like, unless, and then the veteran service officer that's filing that claim has to file that expedited claim with all of the documentation attesting to, like if it's a terminally ill veteran, we would have to get the medical record from the doctor saying this person's terminally ill and how many months are left. So there's, I mean, it's the same thing. We see it too. Veterans come in and they're like, but my brother's sick, or my wife's sick, or my husband's sick, or somebody's sick. And we're like, well, no offense, but everybody that's walking into our office is sick. All of them, unless they wouldn't be there. So the VA takes that, that's their stance on that. Can I answer your question?
Kind of. Still don't know why it takes so long to get an answer though.
Well, so I'll show you in a little bit over here where you can go find those answers. And then I'll kind of drill down. I know everybody's excited about numbers, right? But they are doing substantially better. So Illinois is very unique. And then I'll circle back to your question in a minute. Illinois is very unique. So in Illinois, we have what's called the Military Veterans Assistance Act. And the Military Veterans Assistance Act is the piece of legislation that governs the way our offices operate within the state of Illinois and at the county level. So the way our office works is we are taxpayer funded. So we're, like in our case, and there could be different funding mechanisms, but in our case in Madison County, we're on a levy. So at some time in the past, the citizens of Madison County voted for a levy to fund the Veterans Assistance Commission. And then once the funding was there, they voted to establish it. Under the law, they had to meet other criteria. There has to be so many veterans in the population. There has to be service organizations such as VFW, American Legion, DAV operating in that county. So that's why you may see what we call deserts, where there are no VACs, because they just don't meet the requirements of being able to establish one underneath the law. But here we're pretty set up in Madison and St. Clair County. Bond County has one, but each of them independently can do different things. One may focus on something more than another office. So underneath that law, we have what's called, we're our own entity. So we are what's called a separate unit of local government. And what that means is even though we reside in the county administration building, we're not under the control or the governance of the county chairman. We are underneath our own. We are governed by what's called a commission. And that commission is an elected body from the service organizations in that county. So like in Madison County, we have DAVs, VFW, American Legion, Marine Corps League. And the law says that each of those organizations has to come together and meet one time a year to select delegates and alternates that are our board. So each post in Madison County, I think we have 25, can select 2 representatives, the delegate and the alternate. And then they come to, in our case, we meet every month, and then we meet every quarter for our quarterly meeting, and then we have one meeting a year here, so we actually are going above and beyond the law. Those delegates and alternates show up, and then we handle our business separate of any other political influence. And why is that? Because if a veteran comes in to our office, we're not looking at them saying, well, what side of the political spectrum are you on? I really, in our county, I don't care. I'm there for the veteran and their family. And what that does is by separating us out as a separate unit of government and us having control of our own funding, it allows for us to escape from the winds of politics. So every time there's an election, which you've been around probably Madison County or St. Clair long enough, you know that the way it works, and it's just not just here, that if the new administration comes in, and it's a Republican administration come in, guess what they do with all of their other side of Democrats or anybody who disagrees with them, right? New people get to bring in new faces, new employees, new staff. So we avoid all of that stuff. Same thing if the Democrats come in and win. They can't come into our office and say, Brad, we don't like you because your politics, you're gone. So it offers stability and security for our staff and office. So that is, and it's open, all of our stuff is open to the public. Now, like I said, every VAC operates differently, and every VAC has their own bylaws and are governed a little differently, but we all operate underneath that Military Veterans Assistance Act. And that's where you find the stuff that I'm talking about, like what we shall do, what we can do. So if you're familiar with that word shall, that means we have to do it under the law. So if you're going through that law or any law and you come across the word shall, that means they have to do it or we have to do it. So some of the things we have to do is we have to hold that annual meeting, right? And we have to put a budget together and submit a budget. And those are a couple things that we have to do. So the dichotomy there is that if you need help, you can not only come into our office, but you can go into a local VFW, American Legion, and hopefully that post or person at that post would be able to say, hey, Madison County has a VAC, you need to go talk to them. Or St. Clair County has a VAC, you need to go talk to them. Because that person that's behind the bar or sitting on the bar stool does not have that accreditation and cannot legally advise you or the family about any of their VA benefits. So, because when the federal government came up with that, they're trying to avoid some of that confusion of that veteran's experience of being tugged back and forth with wrong information. And we try to manage that up front with the navigation. We try to explain to them up front, like, hey, here's the way this process is going to unfold. So, the dichotomy between the VAC and the VA is we're advocates. I have no authority to call down to the medical center at all, and we never do, and say, hey, I got Bob here, so-and-so, he needs to get his urology appointment scheduled, and it's not happening. If we have to do that, we operate through social workers, right? We would call a social worker, and we would say, hey, Bob's on Team C down at Jefferson Barracks or John Cochran or whatever team it is, and he's not getting his appointment scheduled for whatever reason. We could weigh in. We could, explain to the social worker, Bob is having difficulty because he doesn't have a phone where he can access the app to get his appointments, or his phone number is whatever. So we can advocate for them and assist, which like our name is, assist them in that navigation. And again, that is very challenging because there's so many different rabbit holes in this space, and we have to not only follow state law, but now we jump to federal law. So the federal statute that governs our office is called the 38 CFR, the 38 Code of Federal Regulations. If you like to read or you need some reading to fall asleep to, please go there. It is thousands of pages, right, of what we can and can't do. And if it's not in that, I can't do it. And then if it's in there, and the 38 CFR says that it can be in there, that means it came from Congress. So once Congress gets it, they pass a bill for veterans, it gets kicked over, then the Code of Federal gets added to the Code of Federal Regulations, and then the VA, that central office, that other part of the VA, gets their hands on the law, and they're the ones who create all of these wonderful policies and procedures of how we have to jump through all of these hoops to get things done. Not us. So your question about why, that would be directed at the central office, right? The directors of the VA. Now, are you going to get anywhere? No. You would have better luck going back to the politician and saying, hey, I can't make headway with this. Here it is in the law, right? And the law's online, so anybody can see it. So if it's in the law, once again, you can stand on the law, and then you can show the VA, hey, here it is in the law. That's what we do. That's where we come in, and we try to tell the VA, hey, this person's terminally ill. They don't have that much time to live. You need to decide their case. They do a pretty good job, depending on what it is. Now, Chris and I, we've been to a lot of these meetings together, right? I mean, different ones over the years, suicide, and each of these ones are handled by different entities. And one that keeps coming up all the time, or comes up a lot, is homeless veterans, right? So homeless veterans is not a function of our office. Nowhere in our state statute does it say that I have to do anything for homeless veterans. The federal government, over the years, has taken on that responsibility at the VA, which it should be a function of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, because that's the entity that manages all homelessness. And then now you have two federal entities that are out there trying to provide benefits and services. So, but on the ground, operationally, homelessness is handled by, in Madison and St. Clair County, Chestnut Health Systems. So they got a grant from the federal government through HUD and the VA called the Supportive Services for Veterans Families. And then they're the ones who get the initial screening for the veteran. If they can't provide something, or we can provide something in addition to, once they get screened by that grant, then they come over to our office and meet with our service officers. And there again, I can't call the SFVF at Chestnut and say, hey, you guys need to do X, Y, and Z, because I'm not in their hierarchy, and they don't report to our office because it's a federal program. And the way you understand it, I can't call the federal government and really make them do anything at all. So we have that challenge. So if you're dealing with that, like homelessness, that's a big one. It's tough to navigate because those veterans don't have phones. They're transient. They get started on the process, and then they can't get a hold. They can't be contacted to follow through the process. So there's a lot of variables, and not just on the homeless side. We see it again with as veterans age. And for those of you guys who don't know, that's my father in the back there. Daddy probably can't hear me. He is also retired Army and in service connected, and received services from the VA, and he received services from AgeSmart. Right? And I'm not gonna, it was tough right? To get I mean, just for him.
Yeah.
And I work in this, I've worked in this, I used to do benefits and stuff for, when I was in the military, that's what I did. I helped service members in service process their benefits while in service. And then when my father started needing services for the aged, and for his disability, I had to step over across the line, right, and ask somebody else for help. Because I didn't understand that side of the house and how it worked with the VA benefits. And I still don't quite understand it, but I rely on the people that do. So like in our case, I am underneath the same thing. So there's two things that I really want to kind of focus on. Is the aging component of this. Because I think that everybody needs to better understand that and the different benefits that are available and how they work and what we're trying to do to overcome some of these challenges that we have when helping families navigate these benefits. And you gotta understand, some of these people have literally no loved one. They have no one helping them. And they're sick, they're aging, and it's just difficult all around. So, before we get into that, I just want to pause again. Any questions? Because now I've pretty much passed out you understand the dichotomy between the VA and our office. You understand the different structures. Now I'm going to get into like what we do and how do we do it. And it's pretty simple. So, any questions at this point?
Will you be speaking up a little bit about aid and attendance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you know if there's any offices in Clinton County?
Clinton County, I can get you the information. I'll show you on our website where you can find all of that information. But remind me if I don't get to it on the website, because it's staying up. So, the way it looks, the veteran comes into our office. Like I said, the VA, I'm of the opinion that the VA became the dumping ground for all things that are veterans and veterans' families. I'm of the mindset that that's not necessarily the best thing, because sometimes the VA, they're not HUD, I'm just using them as an example, so they might not understand housing and how to house people. And then they got a bunch of people that might not do it all the time, helping people do that side of the house. So I still think there needs to be a dichotomy in certain things. And healthcare is one of the things that I think needs to stay underneath the VA and not be farmed out so much, because that adds in some confusion. But at the same time, it gives people more options, and I'll kind of go into that. So that's one of the two things I want to talk about. Somebody can remind me, is aid and attendance or aging benefits, and what's called community care. So those are two of the things that we get a lot of questions about. So, veteran, what's it look like? Veteran comes in our office. Veteran comes into our office, they meet with the service officer. Some of them know what they may need, some of them, most of them, don't. They're blind to the process. Or they have a misunderstanding of how the process may work. So they set an appointment with one of our veteran service officers, and we do what's called the full benefits review, or what we call an FBR. And an FBR looks at three things during that initial contact with our service officers, and only three things. Does the veteran have health care? Are they enrolled in the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration? If not, guess what we stop and do? We enroll, right? The veteran may say, I didn't come here for health care. And we're like, well, we can't get you to anywhere else until we get that first component in place. Because they may say, well, I came here because, I got a heart condition, and I just want to file my claim so I can get my compensation for my heart condition. And we're like, well, if you don't have health care, and you're out mowing your lawn, and you have a heart attack, guess what you don't have anymore? Compensation. Your family loses that compensation. That's gone, because you're now deceased. And the benefits may or may not transfer on to their dependents. So there's a lot of like going back and forth, like healthcare is step one. We go help them get enrolled in the VA, and then we help them set up and get to their first doctor's appointment with their primary care doctor. Then we have to step back because now it's up to the veteran to go to that appointment, meet their primary care doctor, and it's kind of like just a normal primary care that you may have in this non-VA space. You go in there, and they sit down, and they do a physical, and there begins their treatment at the VA, right? Then once we get them enrolled in the VA, we help them get up to their doctor's appointment set. Then we move on to talking about their claim. And we look at, is there any claim for benefits, and this is the criteria, for any in-service injuries or illnesses that they sustained while they were on active duty. And if that's the case, then we have to pause there. We talk about what their conditions are and which ones they think are as a result of their service. And then we ask one question from there. Do you have records? Do you have evidence? If you don't have evidence, then we got to figure out maybe where that evidence may be. It's got to be evidence from having the injury while in service. And then, if not, can we get it from the federal government? If we order the papers or documents from the federal government, we may or may not get them. The federal government has notoriously over the years lost a lot of documents, right? For certain branches, their documents get lost more than others, like the Army and the Marines. A lot of their stuff gets lost in the past, but it's hard to lose a document when a plane falls out of the sky or a helicopter falls out of the sky. It's kind of hard to say, oh, nothing happened, right? But all the stuff that goes on day to day that a Marine or a soldier may go through boots on ground, that's not in their records. So we go off of what's called the ticket to the dance. Does anybody know what the ticket to the dance is? In order for us to proceed in this space of helping them file a claim, we need their DD-214. Anybody ever heard of DD-214? So their DD-214 is their discharge. And it is the ticket to the dance. So a veteran may come in, sit down, want an appointment, and then I'm like, you got your ticket to the dance? And they're like, no. And we're like, guess what? Then you can't come in and dance. Well, I'm just here to try to figure out what benefits I might be entitled to. I don't know until I see the ticket to the dance. Because on that DD-214, it's going to list certain things. It's going to tell me a lot of information. What their job was when they were in the service, where they served, how long they served, what their character of service is, honorable, dishonorable, etc. It's going to tell me all of the ribbons and all the stuff that they may have done. It's going to tell me if they have a Purple Heart. It's going to tell me if they have an award that warrants some of the stuff we're going to talk about when we get to the claim part. So, for example, I mentioned Purple Heart, prisoner of war. Those people go right to the top. I look at the piece of paper, I see Purple Heart, I see prisoner of war, they go right to the top. Right? Rightfully so. So I use those codes and stuff on that DD-214 to help them. They might not see it. They may come in with just a normal DD-214. They're like, well, I didn't do anything special. I wasn't a prisoner of war. I don't have a Purple Heart. I don't have all this other stuff. And they're like, I was just a mechanic for 20 years, working on planes or tanks or whatever. But I have this cancer. How many of you guys have ever heard of the PACT Act? Anybody? Okay, good. So there's another piece of paper in your stack that's just there to get you to this one here. So this is not one evolution. I like to think that it's, you know, each administration is not, and I've seen it, I've been around long enough, each administration is kind of slowly moving the ball in the right direction. It may seem like it's not moving fast, but our federal government doesn't move fast in any space, so we expect it to move fast in the veteran space is same. But after, and you guys have been around, some of you guys may be old enough to know people. My dad's Vietnam era, no veterans that lived through the Vietnam era or Vietnam War. Then you have people that were volunteered. My dad back there volunteered because he knew he was going to get drafted. So he figured I might as well volunteer, at least I get a choice. Okay? You know, he can tell you some stories, but one of the stories is he was down here processing it, and they were like, everybody on this sidelines going to the Marines. And then they said, everybody on this sidelines going to the Army, going to Fort Leonard Wood. My dad said, well, I live close to Fort Leonard Wood, and stepped over, went in the Army. So this PACT Act is a culmination of what all of those Vietnam veterans kept their mouth shut for a very long time, advocating silently in the background through service organizations and individually, and doing it under a total different environment that I would never understand. I would never understand what the Vietnam veterans went through when they came back and they were treated the way they were treated. And the way they were treated kept them and prevented them from seeking the services that they were entitled to from Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln is the one who established the VA, and it was not intended primarily for veterans back then. You might know why? Why it wasn't originally necessarily intended for veterans? Because the veteran was dead. So they set up the VA primarily, Abraham Lincoln, to care for the widows and the orphans of veterans after the Civil War. Luckily, the way combat advanced is, and then in Vietnam, you know, when we had 56,000 lost, it advanced to the point to where we had what's called walking wounded. We had more walking wounded than KIA, which is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. So you have the problem of these people returning to their communities, right? And they're not always returning to communities that have access to, like here, John Cochran, and we have access to Barnes and St. Lucie. Some of these veterans live in rural areas that have nothing. So some of them are entirely receiving a lot of their treatment these days, especially younger ones, over the phone and over appointments like that. But the PACT Act and the Vietnam veterans, through their advocacy work, got this in place. Not just over one president, over multiple presidents, over multiple administrations, over multiple VA administrators, all the way up the chain, denying that stuff like Agent Orange never what? Caused cancer, right? They sprayed it on them, right? We know that to be the case. And the PACT Act was the culmination of that. And basically what the PACT Act does, there's a lot here, but it basically says that if you served in a combat zone, like I served in Iraq, so I fall underneath the PACT Act. And then it's about what's called TERA, and that's an acronym, toxic exposure, radiation, and airborne, right? So now I have what's called a TERA memo. So in my records, in that VBA portal, my little app that I log into, I see a letter from the federal government called a TERA letter. And that TERA letter says that I was in known locations that had these environmental hazards. Now, to the extent that they affect me is the question, right? you have some people, like, thankfully, I'm an open book, so ask away if you guys have a question you want to drill down deep. I smoked for, it was kind of embarrassing when the pulmonologist just asked me down at the VA, because I got a call, because I came back in 2004, and back then, there were no services, even in 2004, for veterans of my age group, because they were still all over in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I was been the very first group that came back. I was put in groups with Vietnam veterans for mental health, which by that point, they were all just kind of just hanging out, having coffee and stuff like that. There was no services for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans at the VA, so we had to start from the ground up. And then they started these things called registries. So a registry, you can go online with the veteran right now. You can type into Google VA environmental registry down there in the bottom left of this form, the VA environmental. You can go to those websites. You can put the veteran's information in. Now, if they don't have one of these VA.gov accounts, now you got to pause and help that veteran. If they complete that survey, I don't know, I think I did it. It was 10 questions initially, asked me where I was, some of the dates, and some of the things that I thought I was exposed to. Then a couple weeks later, I get a call from St. Louis Toxic Exposure Department, and they said, well, we looked at your record, they screened my records, and they said, we don't see that you've ever completed the full screening or the full registry. And they said, would you like to do it? I always opt to say yes, because then when the VA does something to me or for me, I can experience it. So when the next veteran comes in, I can train our team and our staff, and I can say this is the way it worked at the time I went through it. Then they called me. I had maybe another hour with a specialist. Now she drilled down and asked me all kinds of questions, determined that I was receiving treatment for all this other stuff, but I had never been screened for pulmonary, upper respiratory conditions. And because I was a truck driver, right? And you may ask, well, how does that connect? Well, when we were truck drivers, I was leading convoys as a convoy commander in Iraq, and there were probably 100 trucks per mission. And we were all headed, and at any given time, I think at the peak of the war, there were 10,000 trucks, say 5,000 heading north and 5,000 heading south a day. There were so many trucks in the convoy, you could literally probably put them all together and run on the tops of the trucks the entire length or width of the country. There were so many trucks. And we would get to these spots, and it would just literally grind the sand down into a fine, like cake batter mixed consistency. And you would step out, because you'd have to get out of your trucks and undo your loads and everything and walk around your trucks all the time. And it was up to probably a little bit below our knee, fine powder. And every time you stepped, it was like a puff. And it would come up, so soldiers breathed that all day. And if you understand history, we know that Iraq had chemical weapons, right? And this is one of those things that the government, right, denying that they have and have not. Even when I was over there, they had them, and they were left on the ground because the Air Force in Desert Storm bombed the bunkers that had these chemical munitions in them, and then they never went in and cleaned it up, and all those munitions were scattered throughout the sand, and then they detonated, and now you have whatever munition, now it's in the sand, and now you have high levels of contaminants. And then now here I am coming along, and the military decided that they were going to make a truck stop, right, in that same location or by that same location where all those bombs were. And then now you have people on the ground, I'm just using this as an example, in our case, walking around, breathing that 24/7. When we were driving, we couldn't see our hand in front of our face, so we had very limited visibility, and we could not see, so there were no protection, like the windows were rolled down because it was so hot you couldn't drive, so all that stuff you were breathing in all the time. So, they asked me all the questions about that. The good thing now is there's been so many of us that have been through these different screenings that when they go down, as long as they have the ticket to the dance, it's accurate, you know, the DD-214 is accurate, and that doctor, whoever is doing the screening, does their due diligence before I arrive at that appointment. I don't have to go through what we were going through before the PACT Act, where I'd have to go in and tell the doctor that whole story that I just told you guys. Now, because of the PACT Act, they have to what's called assume that I was exposed. I don't have to go and argue and say, oh my gosh. And that's why a lot of veterans got frustrated, because they would go in and they would meet with Dr. A today, tell the same story. Then they would say, oh, we got to set you up with Dr. B. And they go to Dr. B and they tell the same story. And then the veterans, like, by the time they got to Dr. C, they're like, well, I already told Dr. A and B, and why do I keep coming down here and telling you guys the same story? So the registry helped overcome a lot of that stuff, because us service members, there was another project. It was called the Million Man Project. Anybody ever heard of this? Mm-hmm. So you can go to the VA, and it's the Million Man Project, and they have over 1 million entries where veterans have went in and entered their information of where they were, what they were exposed to, what they thought they were exposed to, and they began, it's the largest database of contaminants and people being exposed to environmental toxins in the history of the world. So they have the information. So the federal government has the information. It's just about people taking the time to read the information and knowing exactly what to do, and then they can kind of leapfrog over a lot of this stuff. So then the veteran doesn't get frustrated when they're asked 100 times, can you please tell me why you were exposed? And they're like, I don't know, I just have cancer, or I have this concern. And in my case, the doctors, and they all did a wonderful job. I do not go in there and say, I work for the VAC and I'm here to make sure you guys are doing your job right. I want to see exactly what the veteran would go through. So I can come back, and like I said earlier, I can't coach, but I can skirt the line very close, right? And it helps veterans when you tell them, you lay out the point of this stuff. And I know I'm talking like at a high level for you guys, so I do apologize. But all this information is important for us to understand the history and why some of these things may or may not take so long. And a lot of the research that comes from this stuff. Like the military and the VA are the largest researchers of prosthetics. They're the largest researchers of the blind and visually impaired. They're the largest researcher of burns. So amputees and all of that. In St. Louis, they look at these evaluations, and in my case, they had it down here, pulmonology. The doctor's like, I do not ever see you, I looked at your records and I do not see that you ever had a pulmonology exam related to your exposure to all of that sand and everything. So you didn't get into all of that. And then the next thing you know, I got a call from the pulmonologist. I went down there, I did my breathing test, and all of it came back, thankfully, where my lungs were good, and my breathing is on kind of point where I should be for my age and all that stuff. However, what it did do is it established a baseline, right? It said when I was, I'll tell you my age, 49. When I was 49, I came in and I took a pulmonology test. And at that time, I did not have any marked problems. Now, old VA, before the PACT Act, they would use that exam against me. They would say, well, you came in, you were exposed to all this stuff, then you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Have a good day. Or, if you take it back all the way to Vietnam, they would walk in the hospital and the Vietnam veteran would be like, I'm here for PT, I need some help for mental health. And they're like, yeah, there's the door. Right? You've all heard these stories. And then all of a sudden, and I hate using real people as examples, because I never want any of these illnesses that we see all the time that these veterans face to get worse or continue to cause problems for that person. But it's in my medical record now. I have a baseline. But because of the PACT Act, and because of what the Vietnam veterans did, not just Vietnam, going all the way back, by them keeping on coming in and saying, no, you're going to do this, and we're going to try this, and we're going to do this survey, and you're going to create this registry. Over time, if something happens to me tomorrow, 6 years from now, when I'm 85, I have breathing problems and I require oxygen, guess what? The VA is on the hook. Because I had the ticket to the dance, I was over in Iraq, I have that TERA memo that says I was exposed to some toxic stuff, and now I have a condition that is what's called presumptive. Anybody ever heard of that? So presumptive means they have to assume that my pulmonary condition, or whatever it may be, is a result of my service. No questions asked. Now you get into the semantics of that, right? So I laugh because you gotta laugh at some of this stuff. So cancers are a big one, right? So you have these presumptive lists. Cancers are on there. For Vietnam veterans that were exposed to Agent Orange and developed prostate cancer, they were service connected. The VA started paying them whenever they determined they had prostate cancer and it was related to their service in Vietnam. They started compensating them at 100%. So the VA works in these rating schedules. 0%,
20 minutes.
0% all the way up to 100. And that compensation scale, it equals a dollar amount. So 100% right now equals about $4,000 a month for that veteran. For that veteran who was exposed to Agent Orange that got prostate cancer, that's a male, they started compensating them, their disability, and then some doctor came along and said, hey, guess what? A male does not need their prostate in order to live. So guess what their medical side of the house said? Line them all up for surgeries, cut out their prostates, remove the cancer. Now they no longer have cancer, so now they no longer receive their VA compensation. So they went from overnight from 100% compensation down to 0. So then they have to come back into offices like us, and we had back then, before the PACT Act, we had to re-argue, file new claims, and re-argue the case. Now we have erectile dysfunction. We have urinary incontinence problems. We have sleep problems because they got to get up now because it's more at the night to go urinate more. And we actually, not me, this was before my time, we actually had to re-advocate and re-litigate all of these veterans' claims that they did that to. The PACT Act is their attempt to make things better. So, and a lot of benefits that you see are going to fall under this PACT Act. So that's the big thing when they come in. That's the second part of what we do. And then the claim, the last part is that national cemetery. That's real simple. We just fill out a piece of paper, send it to the federal government. And if the veteran chooses to be buried at a national cemetery when they die, they have what's called a pre-need burial. And then they can go get buried at the national cemetery. And a lot of veterans say, well, what if I don't, what if I want to be buried somewhere else? We're like, well, the VA is going to figure out that you didn't show up. So it's more about space allocation. So A couple of the benefits that there were questions about, aid and attendance. Aid and attendance is, it's not necessarily a standalone benefit that you get. So you gotta have the baseline service connection, right? By being service connected, and depending on what level of service connection you're at, you may be entitled to aid and attendance. For example, I'm 100% service connected for my mental health for PTSD. But I don't require 100% of my care all the time. So in my case, I get aid and attendance, but I get a lower level of aid and attendance. And I like to call it my wife putting up with me check. So I get a little bit added to my monthly compensation check. Now, let's say something happens to me and I have to go into a home. Now I just go back to a service officer. We apply for that next level of benefits. The VA screens it, goes through that process we just talked about, and then approves me for that next level of care. Also, we then here is the caregiver support program. Anybody ever heard of that? So that's a big one. My dad is going through that right now. He's in the caregiver support program, and the VA is paying for him, not full aid and attendance, because he's living with my sister and I, but they're paying for him to go, when I go to work, he just came here with me today, when I go to work, the VA pays underneath the caregiver support program, which is a part of like the aid and attendance side of the house, to go to St. John's, to the adult program there, so my sister and I can go to work. Then we have other veterans, so he was not like in combat, boots on ground Vietnam. So his level of benefits at this time is he gets approved for 3 days at St. John's. And it would actually take a medical order for him to get more days. So if we needed any more extra days, then I got to come over and we apply for the benefit here. So if he needs a 4th day or a 5th day, so my sister and I can get respite or go to work or whatever, then those days are kicked over to AgeSmart. So aid and attendance is a big one. What I mean by that is what you need to do, not only with aid and attendance, but the caregiver support program. This is critical. We see it the most often failure point is the veteran does not have a legal power of attorney in place at the time that they need this benefit. Now, the caregiver program, it does not come through the VBA, the benefit side of the house. It comes through the hospital. And all of the services that are associated with that and the aid and attendance benefit for the treatment of the veteran is ordered by the doctors, not by somebody like us filing a claim. We file the claim that says, yes, that veteran's eligible for the benefit. And then the health administration and the doctors decide what level of benefit that person may be eligible for.
Does that include nursing homes as well?
Yes. Yep. The VA will decide, they decide how much and who, whatever contractual rate. I'm sure you can get into all that. So okay. That's like once they get into that stuff, we, like in our case, we help the veteran understand the look back period on aid and attendance, the income levels, and that it's not, this is the key thing, none of the VA's programs are what's called asset preservation programs or estate preservation programs. None of these programs are intended to preserve someone's estate. However, there are new laws, which you guys may have heard of, and if you haven't, I would write this down. It's called the ABLE account. Anybody ever heard of ABLE? So it's a new law, it's a 529A. And it's an account that anyone with a disability or had a marked disability prior to the age of now 46, in onset of a disability, can now set up one of these accounts and take their money, like they're getting from the VA or Social Security or however their income's coming in, and put it in these ABLE accounts, and it's shielded from the federal government and other governments and other entities from using a certain portion of that money against them for the benefit purposes. So before ABLE, if you kept all your money in a bank, the government could use it against you, or could claw it back if you needed to enter into a home or a nursing home or assisted living or any other service. Now you can put up to, I think it's $100,000 in there, and the government can't use that against you. They can't use it also against you for the purposes of housing, which they often do. So people would be on housing lists, and then they would get to the point and they'd be like, well, you're over the income limit because you have, I don't know, it's very low. I think it was like $4,000 or something before they have to spend it. Now they can save up to a certain amount. And anything that they use this account for that betters their life for their disability, the government's not going to consider it for income purposes.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
One, because it's a generalized question, and two, because I just got the question from the state in the email. Are VA benefits counted toward income for Illinois State Medicaid?
Not underneath, I'm not a Medicaid specialist, but if you put it in the ABLE account, and it hits that ABLE account, so say my check that I get from the VA, say it's $4,000, and I get it every month, and it hits my regular checking and savings account, they can use it against you, and they can claw back at the time of the veteran's passing or the person.
Okay, so we're not going to consider ABLE in this. So if they're getting VA cash benefits, it counts as income for state programs. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was pretty sure of.
Yes, and that's why we're changing the landscape with these ABLE accounts. We're trying to educate like service officers and the public. Let your money hit this ABLE, set up this ABLE account, let it hit the ABLE account first, and then write your checks out of that. You can they'll give you a checking account. You can write your checks for your house payment, car payment, all of that, and it's tax-free, and the government can't use it against you.
Is there a time frame from when you put it in the ABLE?
No, but then there's the Social Security rule, POMS or something, but you might have to look for some of these windows, like your payment date for some of these programs has to make sure that it's in that account before you write the check. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Within a certain period of time.
And did you say you have to be 46?
The current law used to be 26, and then January 1st of 2026, the federal government extended the age to 46. So anybody, that includes me. So in my case, I set mine up, and then I started putting my money in there, whether it's coming from my income or any source. And let's just say I get to 80 years old and I have $100,000 in that account, and then I have to be put into a home. The VA can't look back and say, use that $100,000 against me for the look back period, and they can't count that money against me. So if something happens to me and I pass away, the $100,000, assuming that I didn't use like Medicaid, can go to my family. So it's really a new understanding of this law that allows you to use that ABLE account to help preserve some of your estate.
So these aid attendants and the caregiver support, those are income based?
Yes. So aid attendants, that's a good question. The way I think about it is just because the VA has a benefit doesn't mean that it's available all the time, and it doesn't mean that it's available to every veteran. So the VA, you can imagine it's like a golden crown, right? And it's like a big smorgasbord, and all the stuff on the smorgasbord are benefits. You may walk in today and they may have a benefit, and you're like, oh, I like fried chicken. And then you come back every day and you're like, I got my fried chicken, and then you come back 2 weeks later and there's no more fried chicken. Because the federal government either didn't fund the program, they got rid of the program, they didn't extend it, or whatever. For aid and attendance, there's eligibility, there's two phases. There's eligibility and entitlement, right? I may be entitled, me, to aid and attendance, but I might not, or I may be eligible for aid and attendance, but I might not yet be entitled to it, right? So I can go in and I can say, hey, I'm here, I want to go into a nursing home and I want to use my aid and attendance benefit. The doctors are the ones that decide that, like I said, at the health administration. They're going to say, well, Brad, you don't need a nursing home, right? So therefore, you may be eligible for it, you're just not yet entitled to it. Now, that benefit's going to stay on the smorgasbord until I get to the appropriate age where I may be entitled to it. Or my condition gets so severe that I'm now entitled to it, right? Because I could get sick and end up needing a nursing home at a younger age. So a lot of those benefits, especially aid and attendance, is on what the doctors are saying and how they're wording what is needed in that level of care, right? And then you guys can only go off exactly what that order says.
Right, they have to be able to, usually they need help with activities of daily living. So
Yeah.
yes, they can't just have a caregiver come in just for no reason.
Yes.
They have to follow.
Yep. And then once it extends beyond you guys' level of capabilities, then it's got to go back through the doctor.
Right.
They got to sign back off on it, and then the VA will look at their list of contractors and say, for the next level of care, here's who we contract with. And on the aid and attendance, if it's like $23,000, right? They always advertise it. You guys may see the newspaper article where you got the Navy sailor and this new bride dancing. And they're like, call us and get your $23,000 or something aid and attendance benefit. And they call, and they're like, well, I thought I was eligible for $23,000 or whatever it is. No. If the facility you're in is only $1,000 a month, the VA is not going to pay you $23,000. They're going to pay you $1,000. So it's not anything above and beyond what the cost of care is for that facility.
Okay, so my husband is in a memory care, and I pay, like, self-pay. I've tried to go to the VA, do anything, because the VA will not give me anything. They used to do daycare, I could take him there, but now that he's in memory care, they said, well, we can't pay for that because that's double dipping. And I was like, how is it double dipping when you don't pay anything? And he gets some disability, he's at 80%, but and we've tried to increase, because there's people that walk around getting things, and they got 100% in no time. He put 30 years in, so he's been retired. He has dementia, which is not service related. They said he qualified for stuff, but I'm sorry, but you can't use it. Is it income based, his monetary thing? And then they're like, but he is now incompetent, so he needs a fiduciary.
Yes.
So I'm like, you're telling us he needs all this help, but the VA is not helping us any. And I mean, it's a lot of money each month.
Sure.
And then if we got $4,000, that would help out a whole lot, but we don't. And then after he passes, what benefits does the surviving spouse independent? Because we have one with a disability.
Yeah.
So
you would be entitled to DIC, which would be 50% of the service-connected rate that he's at. This disability and indemnity compensation. Pardon?
There is other people that I know, and also this one, they get benefits through their child. Their child's added on to it, but for some reason, Social Security claims that as income on the child's thing and takes it off. It's really weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure on Social Security benefits, but.
So is there anything we can do, because
So that's a good question. So what I advise everybody to do, so having a service officer is kind of like having a mechanic. It's kind of like having an HVAC guy. It's kind of like having an electrician or a carpenter that right? Mm-hmm. So when I talk about veteran service officers, you need a veteran service officer if you have a veteran who is a loved one, or you're married to a veteran, or you're the veteran themselves, you need a veteran service officer as part of your toolbox.
We tried to go through,
And
they keep,
depending on, you gotta understand.
he's annoying. He was annoying for a bit, so they were like, don't go to that person anymore. So, but is there like a income limit? Because they said, yes, he qualifies, blah, 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 but
So-
we have to take something away. Now,
So like in our case, or like in my case, there would be no income limit because I'm a 100% service-connected disabled veteran. So my benefits are gonna flow first through this. And, sorry. And one of a good thing, and I know I'm coming to an end here, a good thing to do is to establish a relationship with the veteran service officer. Just because another veteran is receiving a benefit or service does not mean that the next veteran is gonna receive that same level or benefit. Because they may have stopped it. They may have stopped serving it on the smorgasbord. Or they may have put limited amounts out there with restrictions on it. You only can have one piece of chicken. But the other veteran came in and got the benefit when they could get unlimited chicken. So, and then what happens is, and this is why you have a veteran service officer who's good, is because we want to explain to people like you and your husband is that these things change. And you may be frustrated today because they're not serving chicken or what you wanted. That doesn't mean not to come back, because a month from now, guess what they could change? Add more funding to it.
and you're in Edwardsville?
We are in Edwardsville.
Because he's in the Glen Carbon at Brightly, so.
Yeah. And the only thing is like, I just encourage you guys to develop a relationship with the service officer. Our office is here, but don't be surprised if you're from St. Clair County and you're needing services. We're going to push you to St. Clair County because funding is specific, and it also keeps you close to where you're at. And that VAC probably knows the agencies and people that work specifically in that geographical area.
So, like, if I get someone from Monroe County that calls that I don't think has a VAC, can I send them to St. Clair County?
You can, because we would automatically default to, if it's a federal benefit that we're helping them apply for, and there's not another VSO or VAC or whatever in that geographical area, and the person's willing to travel in.
Right.
I mean, then yeah, we would do them.
Where is it in St. Clair County?
Yeah, down on the square, but I think they're moving. I think they just got approved to come off of the square. I guess when you go into the traffic circle, right, it's off to the right, if I'm right.
It's in the intergovernmental grants department building,
Yeah,
same building with them.
yeah. So when you get into like specific benefits, like that young lady was asking about, those are questions for you when you sit down with that VSO. Because at that time, we're going to have that veteran's ticket to the dance. We're going to have all of their VA record pulled up. And we're going to be able to see exactly what's going on. It's very difficult for me to speculate on any case at any given time for any given veteran. And I can't lump them all together, and I can't separate them all out, because every case is unique. Every veteran has different benefits, and every veteran came in to the service at different time that entitled them to different benefits and services. So I made it an hour and a half, and I'm really just scratching the surface. But I will stick around. And there is a sign-in sheet. If you have questions, specific questions, like where you have a veteran that you actually need questions answered on, I will circle your name, and I will make some notes, just very simple notes, and a VSO will contact you. Fair enough? I thank you guys for your time. This has been wonderful because it allowed me, there's really never a presentation where I'm allowed this much time. Seriously. So thank you.
Thank you, Brad, for coming. And just as I'm going to be doing reciprocal next month, actually in exactly a month.
And you get an hour.
Oh, I get an hour. Okay, good. I can do an hour. I want to thank everybody for coming. As Brad said, he's going to stick around for a while, but we're going to shut the video down for this. What I do want to tell you